this morning and this evening for me. I'm so happy to be here, even if it's just the head and shoulders, and such a privilege. When Dr. Pollack asked about the possibility of a presentation this year, we were just beginning to look at deuterium depleted water. And so we thought this was an interesting opportunity to conduct several case studies that we might present at this conference. So if you're ready, dive in with me now as we explore the effects of drinking deuterium depleted water on health, as we measured them using galvanic skin response and heart rate variability testing. Now, so that we all start off on the same page, I'd like to kind of just bring everybody together about what we mean when we're talking about deuterium depleted water. Well, deuterium, of course, is an isotope of hydrogen. And this smallest of atoms consists just of a proton, an electron. When there is the addition of a neutron, the mass is doubled. And that has some interesting consequences. Deuterium behaves differently than hydrogen in numerous chemical and metabolic reactions. Water that's made with deuterium rather than hydrogen is referred to as heavy water. See the illustration on the left. Deuterated water actually sinks when it's frozen. So the heavy water would be significant. Although H2O and P2O taste the same to most people, it actually takes more energy to boil deuterated water than it does normal water. And it ends up freezing first. So some interesting properties there that are different. Now, all natural water contains deuterium. Most water on the planet contains about 150 parts per million. But the concentration varies depending on where you live. So it's interesting, we know now that the polar regions have a lesser concentration of deuterium than does the equator. Sea level has greater concentration of deuterium than do the mountainous regions. And that's because as water precipitates out and rises up from the mountains, heavier water falls first as rain, leaving the lighter water then to be deposited in the mountains. So we've measured 90 parts per million in melted Antarctic ice, and we measured 180 parts per million in the underground aquifer in the Sahara Desert. So now, what is deuterium depleted water? For the most part, people consider today that anything with a concentration that's 130 parts per million or less is deuterium depleted. But the degree to which the water is deuterium depleted is significant. And that will have significance as we move forward into this presentation today. So the first question that a lot of people ask is, how could reducing deuterium make a difference? Because seriously, we're talking about 150 parts per million. That seems so inconsequential. And in fact, for so many years, our scientific community has considered it inconsequential. And so only recently have we begun to look at consequences, or the possible consequences of reducing or increasing deuterium that's in water. But while we do this presentation today, I just want you to think about the following two things. Consider the role of hydrogen proton pumping mechanisms, particularly ATP and enzyme activation mechanisms where their hydrogen tunneling or proton tunneling is a factor. What happens when this pumping mechanism that's used to receiving proton at proton suddenly gets proton and neutron? Do we have to kick off that neutron? Do we have to kick out the whole thing? We don't really know at this point in time, but the conjecture is that there's a little bit of a stutter that happens in that mechanism. And, for a long time, even considering that, it was considered inconsequential. But think about how many times the proton pumps through the mitochondria, and how many mitochondria, and there may be some significance there. Consider also then that the strength, the deuterium bond, is greater than the strength of a hydrogen. And in water, hydrogen bonding is everything. In biology, hydrogen bonding is everything too. So keep those in mind as we proceed. According to the most recent clinical work, even a seemingly small reduction of deuterium within the body can influence numerous metabolic functions, with resulting in improvements in health. Well, what specifically does the research show? Following 4 points are from an interview with Dominic D'Agostino from the University of Southern Florida, who has been involved in the last few years with deuterium-depleted water. And he tells us that deuterium-depleted water stabilizes DNA. Well, wait a minute. Water stabilizes DNA, but it's the hydrogen-bonded network and the organization of that network that stabilizes DNA. And so if we can stabilize it further by removing that larger atom, deuterium, we can do some interesting things about resisting genetic mutation and providing protection from radiation damage. That's initially what the research is showing. Well, deuterium-depleted water also increases ATP production, just as we were conjecturing before. By supporting the mitochondria, we are showing in research that deuterium-depleted water increases ATP. Deuterium-depleted water enhances existing therapies. Much of the early research that was done with deuterium-depleted water was with cancer and tumorous cancers. And the research showed basically that not only did deuterium-depleted water end up being a therapy in and of itself, but that when it was used in conjunction with traditional therapies, those therapies were more successful. And the side effects of traditional cancer therapies, which are many, were not quite so bad. Well, the research has also shown us that deuterium-depleted water, or drinking such, is completely free of side effects. In our brief experience with this water, we have seen that some people experience some detox effects, but we're not considering those side effects. So it would appear that the body prefers deuterium-depleted water. In fact, the body makes deuterium-depleted water, because metabolic water, come to find out, is deuterium-depleted. Now, this is our definition here of metabolic water. Water created inside a living organism through metabolism by oxidizing energy-containing substances in food. Dr. Laszlo Boros from UCLA, who has been doing some very interesting research with the ketogenic diet and that connection with deuterium-depleted water, tells us cellular water is deuterium-depleted, depending on what we oxidize. And here's the connection between the ketogenic diet and deuterium-depleted water. The ketogenic diet is a high-fat diet. Come to find out, animal metabolism produces 110 grams of this metabolic water for every 100 grams of fat that's consumed and metabolized. Less than half of that amount when protein or starches are metabolized. So the ketogenic diet, and nobody has quite understood for a long time why it was so successful, but the idea now is that it's because the body is producing more metabolic water, which is deuterium depleted. Very, very interesting. All right, so Melanie, the co-author of Dancing with Water, and myself asked ourselves the question, how are we going to get a hold of some of this water so that we can see if all of what we're reading about, which was almost fantastic in some regards. How are we going to get some of this water? There was nobody in the United States producing significantly reduced deuterium concentration water. And we ended up finding this water called Clarivia, which is produced 4 hours from where you are in Romania. The water in our first experience was very, very beautiful, but it was also extremely expensive. It's a costly process, and we asked ourselves, is the water worth this price? And if it's worth this price, how would we ever convince anybody of that? And so we said, how can we then perhaps monitor any health effects, any potential benefits? We connected with the Advanced Health Clinic in Farmington, Utah. This clinic is the largest integrative health clinic in the state of Utah, run by a couple of very visionary women that we'd had some experience with before. And we said, what have you got in the way of diagnostic equipment that can possibly help us to quantify any possible benefits of this water? And they suggested 4 things. First of all, they said, bioimpedance analysis, which is body composition analysis, and also has the capacity to measure intracellular and extracellular water, might show us some interesting things there. Because with age, we know that intracellular water decreases and extracellular water increases. And not a lot of things can help shift that balance back to the youthful intracellular, extracellular water ratios. But let me just say right offhand that in my abstract, I said we would be reporting on bioimpedance analysis. Come to find out in our research, we were not able to show anything here, not with the 3 case studies that we came through with. However, we suspect there may be something with a little bit greater study that might show up using bioimpedance analysis. Okay, they also suggested something called galvanic skin response. Galvanic skin response, also known as electrodermal screening, can measure thousands of physiological parameters. This is German technology that's been around for quite a few years now. It's not accepted in the U.S. in the medical realm, but in many, many countries it is. And even in the U.S., there are a lot of health practitioners, alternative health practitioners, that are using this type of equipment. It's a class of equipment. And the Zytoscan here is just one type of equipment that the clinic had. So they said, because of the capacity to measure so many physiological parameters, if anything will show us what the water can do, it will be this. They also suggested something called heart rate variability testing. Heart rate variability is a medically accepted diagnostic tool used in many hospitals to determine whether or not therapies are actually being successful. It provides an assessment of the autonomic nervous system and a very accurate representation of physiological health. They also suggested that they often use a health profile questionnaire. These are used in a lot of medical studies. They're subjective, but they help to quantify some subtleties in any improvements or not that may be made during the duration of research. So these were their suggestions. And we went ahead and let me tell you what we found with galvanic skin response. First of all, I really have to give you a background on how this type of equipment works and what the Zytoscan shows. So it measures the body's response to thousands of frequencies. Don't ask me how this works, but there's a huge database, and the body is presented thousands of frequencies and monitors the body's response over a period of time to each one of these frequencies. And out of all the data that is collected, you can get a very accurate picture of where there are stresses in the human body and what those stresses may be from. So this graph here that you can see on the left is what I call a spiral graph. And each one of these red dots represents something that's in a body that's out of balance. Now, if the spiral graph showed everything that was out of balance, the whole graph would be one big red smattering of dots, because at any moment in time, with the number of things this equipment can measure, a lot of things are out of balance. But healing is like peeling an onion. And if you're going to look at some serious illness or something, let's just say someone has diabetes and they want to approach that. You don't just cure diabetes. There are so many other outlying factors that play into that must be addressed first in order to really get to the deeper levels of healing. And so this graph shows the outer layer of the onion. It shows what the body needs to take care of first. And everyone's graph will be different as far as number of things that are presenting, because every body is different. So this is the outer layer of the onion. And you also get, as you can see here, I'm just showing you a part of one of 4 pages of each one of these that are represented with a code or some marker for what each one of these dots represents. These are referred to as out of range markers. Okay, we knew from past experience with the clinic and working that just drinking water, even tap water, would initially balance some of these out of range markers. And the question was, would deuterium depleted water sustain the balance to a greater degree? We knew that water, once like we said, would initially balance some of these out of range markers. But we also knew that if the balance held for more than 30 minutes, then we had something that had some potential for working as in some kind of a therapeutic way. And the answer to the question we found was yes. The next slide that I'm going to show you is the 3 individuals that ended up being in our case study and what happened for them drinking 1 cup of deuterium depleted water, waiting for 45 minutes, and then doing a retest. So now, whereas the first spiral graph that I showed you was just a spiral of red out of range markers, this time we've got before and after. And the original out of range markers are now the gray that you see here. These were the original out of range markers, and everything has been reprioritized because after drinking 1 cup of deuterium depleted water at a very low concentration, we were able to bring almost half of those out of range markers into balance. This was significant. So participant number 1, participant number 2, once again, almost half of the out of range markers came into range now, represented by the green dots, and the red dots are the reprioritization after drinking the water. Participant number 3 had a very striking response to the water, and almost all of those markers were brought into balance. Now, this was short-term balance. Still, even though we could tell that this was a powerful supplement, we had the Advanced Health Clinic's interest at this point in time, and they were ready to move forward with this. So we went ahead with 3 case studies. These were 3 individuals in their late 50s and early 60s, all women. The idea we determined was that 1 cup of deuterium depleted water was the best overall for most people to start with in order to show some results in our research. That water was best taken first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. And we asked for no other changes in exercise or diet or routine at all. Just drink 1 cup of this water at a very low part per million concentration first thing in the morning. All right, so here's the results. What I'm showing you once again is the easiest thing we thought to do, because this equipment can show us so much information. The easiest thing for us to do was to follow the original out-of-range markers, and that's what we're doing here then. So participant number 1 originally had 81 out-of-range markers in her outer layer of the onion, if you will. After 2 months, steadily brought into balance, we only have 49 that are still out of balance. And after 3 months, 90% of the original out-of-range markers had come into balance. Strikingly, for participant number 2 and participant number 3, by the end of 4 months, all of the original out-of-range markers had come into balance. You can see here a little tiny green bar, but I had to put something there to show you that there was actually a 4-month scan taken, and all of those original out-of-range markers had come into range. This was very striking results according to the clinic and their experience, just with water. Because the clinic uses this type of diagnostic tool, and what they do is they'll balance these out-of-range markers for an individual with supplements, homeopathics, herbs, vitamins. They have, their whole room of things that they'll send a patient home with that they'll take for, 6 to 8 weeks, which will then balance many of these markers. And then on the next scan, most of these markers will be hopefully balanced, and the next layer of the onion will present itself. That's how this works. But they were very surprised that water alone, after 4 months, had balanced all of these markers for some of the participants. Okay, let's look at what happened with heart rate variability. Once again, we said this was an assessment of the autonomic nervous system, and it was a very accurate picture of health. There's a lot of information, just like with the scan, there's a lot of information that's presented in heart rate variability, but I'm going to be talking and showing you just this graph, because it's the easiest way to just look at what happens. The graph actually plots 13 different levels of physiological health on this bottom axis. And on the side axis here, we're plotting 7 different levels of what they call an adaptation reserve. So if you're an athlete in peak health, your little yellow diamond would find itself plotted up here in the blue region. And if your health is not good, or if you're elderly, you're going to find yourself in the red region, which is not good physiologically or adaptively. All right, so let's look at before and after for our 3 case studies. Now, we only have heart rate variability results after 2 months. We did not get a 4-month reading on this, but 2 months is already showing us some very interesting changes. Participant number 1 came in at a level of 10, where 1 is best, and a level of 5, where 1 is best. So ideally, a person would like to be found in the center of the graph, or at least in the upper left-hand portion. After 2 months of drinking the water, we've moved from a 10 to an 8 and stayed at the same level of adaptability. Participant number 2 starts with a 10 and 4, and actually makes a trade-off between moving 1 level better in physiological health to a level down in adaptability. And I'm not sure how to interpret that. Not as great as participant 1 after 2 months. But look at this graph. Participant number 3, who started at 10 and 5, ended up after 2 months at an 8 and a 2. This was so striking they couldn't really explain this kind of improvement in 2 months. Very dramatic. Let's take a look at what happened with the health profile questionnaires then. This little questionnaire is a very simple 1-page questionnaire, but it covers the bases. Let's just look at the first one here, headaches. If you don't have any headaches ever, you give yourself a 0. If you have an occasional headache, you give yourself a 1. If you have some pretty severe and regular headaches, you'd end up giving yourself a 4. So you can see that as you go through each one of these things that measures skin, heart, respiration, digestive, joints and muscles, even emotions with mood swings, depression, and that kind of thing are monitored. The lower the score, the better, okay? So let's look at the results of the health profile scores as they were taken during the course of these case studies. Participant number 1 starts with something here in the upper 80s after 2 months and after 4 months. Some significant improvement all the way across the board, the same trends we are seeing here. Okay, so my work as one of the authors of Dancing with Water is to present people with practical tools to raise water's energetic potential. We're talking about things in the book like the use of vortices, magnetics, geometry, light and sound, and other methods of returning what we refer to as water's life force. That's our work, and that's our interest with Dancing with Water. So let me say right now that the participants in these case studies did not just drink deuterium depleted water. It was enhanced. To get the most out of the water, we placed it in what we refer to as an earth resonance device. Now, this picture that you see here is an adaptation of something that was originally conceived by John Maluski and later referred to as MEOW, or magnetically enhanced Ormus water. His idea was to bring the Ormus elements in water into their Ormus state or high spin state, their energetic peak. That was the original concept. But Melanie and I in our work have found that paramagnetic substances, rather than magnetic substances, I didn't mention that John surrounded the water with magnetite. That was the magnetically enhanced Ormus water idea, or MEOW. We've found that paramagnetic materials are more gentle and often more profound in their effects with water. So we have come up with this blend of paramagnetic sand, quartz sand as a kind of an amplifier, a little bit of magnetite, mica, and garnet, which is also highly paramagnetic. According to the Zytoscan testing that we did at the beginning of our studies, placing the water in this environment raised it to a new energetic level. And so we proceeded with preparing the water, placing it for several days in an earth resonance device in this environment surrounded by this blend we've discussed, and that's the water that we drank. Well, why paramagnetic? Paramagnetic materials, it appears, amplify the extremely low frequencies that include the Schumann resonance and other natural resonances of the Earth. They've been referred to as a tuning fork for life because they balance circadian rhythms and many biological rhythms. Of course, the astronauts are in space, and the space stations, we're providing them with the Schumann resonance. These seem to be very balancing for all life forms. And interestingly enough, Phil Callahan, who is the author of Paramagnetism, Rediscovering Nature's Secret Force of Growth, his measurements at the round towers in Ireland, which are made of paramagnetic rock, revealed ELF emissions 3 to 8 times higher than normal ELF emissions. So emerging evidence also suggests that ELF, or earth resonance, may have an effect on water's structure, as you can see here. I'm moving rapidly. I believe my time is closing in on me. The second edition of Dancing with Water, which will be out at the end of the year, we make this statement. It makes perfect sense that the resonance of the Earth would support the coherent liquid crystalline structure of her most prized possession, water. Paramagnetism is uniquely tied to the Earth's magnetic field and to the resonance of the Earth. Finely ground paramagnetic rock is the equivalent of millions of weak magnets amplifying the greater magnetic field of the Earth. But that is not all. According to Callahan, the paramagnetic forces of rock amplify not only the extremely low radio waves, but also the photon waves generated in the infrared and visible control region of light. Now, it's Dr. Pollack that has shown us that those infrared wavelengths bring structure to water. So if Callahan is correct, then paramagnetic materials amplify two of the most important frequency bands for water, the ELF and the infrared. So we concluded then that the combination of this very beautiful Romanian water with a very low part per million concentration and an earth resonance device produced potent, measurable health effects. In other words, and this is what I'd like to leave you with, when this already therapeutic water is conditioned using paramagnetic forces that naturally amplify the structuring resonances from the earth and the sun, our organic universe, then less is necessary to produce health benefits, making this water realistic and a practical investment in health. We really want to encourage continuing research for the long-range health effects of deuterium-depleted water and the effects of paramagnetism on water structure. Melanie and I are not scientists, and we don't have access to laboratory equipment for the most part. So we encourage this kind of research. We're very excited about both these 1 and 2. Big, big thanks to the Advanced Health Clinic for their help with diagnostic testing and their expertise in evaluation. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much for this presentation, MJ. So any questions? Yes, over here.
I wonder if you calculate a change in the concentration of the if you calculate the change of concentration of deuterium in your body by 25% of, let's say, completely depleted deuterium water, then you change from an average of 150 ppm to 109.95 ppm. So how this can be an effect at all is much less than the average distribution of your amount of deuterium in your body on other people's. I cannot see it doesn't work in arithmetic.
I'm sorry, I can't even hear the question. I'm sorry. If somebody can make it so that I can hear the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. I can hear you much better.
Simple calculation. 25 completely depleted deuterium water in an average body will give you a change of from 150 ppm of deuterium in your body to 109.95. So how that, it's less than the average change of daily, I believe, or between different people. How that can at all is any effect?
It's a great question, and I don't have a good answer, except that I have seen some work in the veterinary world where they gave dogs deuterium depleted water, very low concentration, like this, about the same concentration, and they monitored the serum levels in the blood for a period of weeks and actually months, showing that within days, the serum concentration of deuterium was reducing very rapidly down to, I wish I had the slide in front of me. This is Dr. Gabor Sablier's work with some veterinary colleagues. but they showed that the deuterium concentration in the blood went down and hit a plateau, and as soon as the dog then began to drink normal water again, the concentration of deuterium went up. So, I don't know. We don't have all the answers. We're not doing the research ourselves necessarily, other than to say that this is the reason it's been ignored for so long, is because it just seems so crazy that a small, seemingly insignificant reduction in deuterium could make some dramatic effects. And yet, the researchers are very excited about what's happening. That's what I can share.
Thank you, MJ. So we have one more question.
Time for one more question. Yeah. Could you come to the computer, please?
Okay. Okay, I hope you can hear this question. I was just wondering what your thoughts were about contaminants when you undertook your tests. So particularly I'm thinking about LED lights and the effect of the blue structure within LED lights, and also glyphosate. There's been quite some research on both of those that affect the ATP pumping mechanism and deteriorate it quite effectively. And so I was just wondering, had you thought about that, considered that in terms of your case studies that you've looked at?
No, I'm afraid we did not even at all. That wasn't anything that we looked at.
Okay, thank you.
And not an area of expertise for me either.
Thank you, MJ.
Okay, MJ, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very good night. Very good night.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.